Welcome back to Zestology. Today, tapping into the hidden unconscious and how that can help boost your energy, vitality and motivation. I'm Tony Whiten, coming to you from right by the River Thames in West London, and you can probably hear all sorts of birds getting quite excited in the distance. Lovely early evening as I record this Zestology intro. I like to record them out and about, and really enjoyed today's podcast with John Bargh. It's not dark, talking about tapping into the subconscious mind and the unconscious mind. It's the hidden but helpful and powerful part of the mind that we can access and understand through experimental science. And there's a lot of science in what John does. That's his basis, and in fact he starts this podcast by talking about some of the scientific experiments that he and his team and other people have carried out to work out how we do things well, how we communicate well, and how we can help tap into our unconscious mind and other people's unconscious minds as well. It's really interesting. In this podcast, we cover the influential psychological forces that are at play as we go around about our daily lives. Checking a dating app, holding a cup of hot coffee, getting the flu jab. In all these instances, there are weird psychological things going on, and we're going to look at them today. We're going to look at getting better at chess, getting better at stuff in general, tapping into the power of the unconscious. Quite a bit of time spent chatting about online time, online activities, and how this cuts your mind in half. Not literally, but how it kind of really divides your attention. And then we look at subliminal ways of hacking into the mind and lots more stuff. Now I have to say that whilst we recorded this podcast at my new house, next door there's a lot of building work going on and it's very loud. So if you hear some building work going on halfway through this podcast, I can only apologise. But it's all part of the fun of living in this part of London. Planes fly overhead, the birds make the noises, there's a motorway nearby. It's all very jolly, and there's a bit of building work in the background as well, and John didn't mind, and I'm sure you won't either. John starts off by talking about the crazy subliminal ways that we are influenced and the science that is backing all of this up, and there is plenty of science, academic rigour and research behind John's work. He is the author of a hugely popular book, which I'll tell you about at the end of the podcast, and you'll hear about at the end of the podcast. And here he is on Zestology. Hope you enjoy it.
The studies and organizations they're going on out of basically University of Toronto right now are astounding what they're finding. If a CEO, they do research in the real world with real companies. A CEO of a company in the Southwest United States, a large company, Monday morning sends an email to all his employees, okay, and is now starting putting these kinds of words having to do with high performance and achievement and striving and working hard, these kinds of things in that email. Over that next week, half the company gets that email. Other company gets an email, just a usual one, without those kinds of words. The ones who get the email having words about achieve and strive and perform and so forth outperform the other group. And they actually have better customer satisfaction. They get more work done. They have no idea this has happened, but by having these words relating to this goal of achievement and high performance and so forth, it triggers that, and they actually do that the rest of the week more than the other people.
Wow.
And study after study has shown the power of just triggering these representations in our mind by priming or by these influences, with pictures too of people cooperating or someone winning a marathon and going across the finish line and breaking the tape at a marathon. These kinds of pictures or these kinds of symbols very subtly, just on the piece of paper that you're using, in your work that week or whatever, have a great influence. And study after study shows that. All's being done here is a little bit of a nudge, a little bit of a tweak or a prompt or a prime, whatever you want to call it. But 10 years of these kinds of studies have shown over and over again that these goals, whatever it is, to cooperate in negotiation, to be fair, to take the other side, to try to come to a cooperative kind of answer in negotiations. People negotiate more fairly when fairness is basically the thing that's been triggered instead of achievement. It doesn't really matter. It's like the outside information triggers these goals, and then you get the results. You get more fair negotiation. You get acceptance of offers from the other side in negotiation settings, or you get greater performance at work, more money raised for charities, for public television in Canada over a 5-day work week. It just goes on and on. So the logic here is very simple. If it can be done to you by your boss or by the people in a study, you can do it to yourself. And you can set up your world. You can have these kinds of triggers or cues to these goals that you want to achieve. And it doesn't have to be to make money. It could be to be nicer to your family. It could be be a more kind, generous person. It could be personal goals, not just money goals or professional goals. It could be any kind. Or you want to practice harder, or you want to be in better shape. All these kinds of things. Whatever it is, it's important to you, and you want to change yourself. You want to get to a future. You want to be somebody different. You want to be in better shape. You want to be healthier. You want to lose weight. You want to, whatever it is. These things have been shown to work. In grocery stores, cues about dieting and healthy eating handed out in a Dutch grocery store to people as part of those recipe flyers, they hand out when you come into the store like that. The people afterwards buy less snack food, significantly less. In euros, I think it's like a 4.2 euros in the control condition, 1.8 in the condition where they have the diet and healthy eating flyer. They look at their cash register receipts coming out of the store after they've seen the flyer with the healthy eating or the control one. So all these things are shown to work in the real world. Why not use them yourself? Why not incorporate them into your world too, and help you get what you want? I mean, it's not to get something you don't want. It's not to change yourself in ways you don't want. These are things you do intend and want to accomplish. These would be helps.
So, I was thinking actually something priming that I've been doing recently is I've been using a service called Readwise. And I feel like we always need little nudges in the right direction, which it sounds like is what you're suggesting. And this service, Readwise, picks basically syncs up with your whole Kindle library, everything you've ever read on Kindle, on all your highlighted passages. And then it just sends you 3 selected quotes every day. And funnily enough, I get the same kind of, because they're not random motivational quotes. They're quotes from my favourite books that I've decided to highlight over the past 5 or 6 years of reading on Kindle. And I get this email every day at midday or whatever it is, and I read through, and sometimes, if it's quotes, especially from some of my favourite books, I do feel that extra kind of little motivational buzz to get things done or to live up to my values or whatever the highlighted quote says. So that's an example, I suppose, isn't it?
This is great. I mean, I'm actually working with a company called HappyGo, HAPPEGO, trying to develop those kinds of primes on smartphones. And I know there's other companies and startups doing that. This Readwise sounds wonderful. I mean, what's going on here is that you're getting around the problem that we've had in my field for 30 years. And that is, how do you prime yourself? Because these things work if you do them, and other people are advertisers, governments, they're doing it to you. How do you do it yourself? But knowing you're doing it gets in the way. If you assign that task to something like an app or Readwise or HappyGo or something else, as long as you trust them, and you know that they're trying, they have your interest in, they could be doing other things. Yeah. But if you can trust them like that, and they're doing it, that's perfect, because now it's coming from outside, just like an ad is, or just like an influence from somebody else. But you're actually getting what you want and helping you. So you're having an outside person prime you, do the priming that you really can't do yourself.
What do you think of something I've spoken about on this podcast a few times? Many years ago, when I was first getting into the unconscious mind, I downloaded a program for my MacBook, and it's called Subliminal Message Pro, and it works on these subliminal message ideas that used to flash up. People used to put them in TV ads in the 70s. 1/25th of a frame saying buy this product, right? And what it runs in the background. You can put your motivational messages on there, and it might be whatever it is. I read lots, or whatever it might be, or I'm focused, and then just almost in a kind of unconscious blink of an eye, you'll get these messages flashing up on your screen. Do you think that's the kind of thing that could work in this day and age?
I know a little bit about the technology here, and that's I would say the problem with the subliminal messages generally. Unconsciously, you can't integrate information very well. It's one thing that unconscious processes cannot do that well, integrate coming in. Okay. So language is tricky because with words, if you give more than one word, like a phrase, that has to be integrated to understand the meaning because the different words combine in grammatical ways. And it's not something that happens unconsciously very, very easily at all. If at all, it's very crude. The best thing you can do subliminally is use single words that really target exactly what you want. But when it's phrases, I would be skeptical because there's a lot of research showing that, meanings of phrases. For example, I'll give you an example. If you show people the word casual, that lights up a positive reaction. Subliminally, that's a positive thing. Okay. Surgeon is positive. A surgeon as an expert helps people when they're ill. That's a good thing. You put those two together. Casual surgeon. Yeah. Wait, hey. You know what? Unconsciously, what you get there, you get two positives. You get a double positive. What about green? Green is good. Bread is good. Yeah. Green bread. No. So, yeah. If it was sophisticated enough to integrate, green bread should be bad, but it's a double good. And so you have to be careful with more than one word subliminally, but except for that little caveat, I think that the idea is that if that meaning gets in, it'll have its effect whether or not you're aware of it. That's the idea. And so subliminal stuff should work. In fact, they're still using subliminal techniques in ads right now. I mean, there's ads on TV, internet that have these subliminal frames in them. People have been sending them to me. So it's in the U.S. It's not illegal. It's there's something about it's a no. You should not do it. Tisk. But there's no force of law. So actually, it's not illegal to have subliminal ads on.
I suppose one of the reasons why that is that it's really just different forms of communication. I mean, it depends just how manipulative it is. But I mean, for example, one of the things we used to look at in hypnosis is the fact that words have a double meaning, just like you were saying with combining green and bread. I mean, for example, you could tell someone to focus on their heel, but the word heel is also, means to heal, doesn't it?
Right.
And so that's why it's quite hard to kind of potentially outlaw advertising or persuasion skills or even manipulation skills towards the unconscious mind.
Yeah, well, advertisers know what they're doing. I think it's $100 billion in the U.S. is maybe more than that spent each year on advertising. They wouldn't be doing that if it didn't work, and they weren't very, very able to influence people through ads. So to think that you're watching these things and it's not having any effect on you is a little naive. They know very well. They also have giant research departments to know how to prime and add and influence people, far more than universities have and little social psychology labs have to do research and publish them in journals. Their money is involved and big stakes are involved, and so they have a lot more firepower to develop these influence attempts on us, and they're usually very, very ahead of the curve too.
Yeah, and that actually takes me back to my addiction to reading online news, because it's not just kind of advertising departments, it's also, definitely the big Silicon Valley companies. They've just got so much money and so many resources that they're creating. On the other side of that app button is 600 people skilled in manipulating you to use this app for as long as possible.
The clickbait stuff, don't you want to know what that one vegetable is that's so terrible for us? I still haven't figured that one out. Like, what is this vegetable we should get rid of? And it's everywhere. It's like but you can't find out. You can't click on this stuff and you never get the answer.
And in terms of kind of tapping into the power of the unconscious, what I worry about is that my slightly addictive mind gets drawn into that kind of thing very quickly. And I heard someone describe it the other day as having a certain level of human bandwidth in the mind. And I feel like too much of my bandwidth is taken up with stuff that's not that important. I just actually, I kind of know what I think about vegetables, and I don't need to know about that extra vegetable. So I'm interested in kind of tapping into the power of the unconscious mind in a positive way. I know that you've really looked at the ways that you can kind of, get better at stuff, and you had this revelation moment, didn't you?
Yeah. that took a long time to get to that point, but it's something that was my passion. It was the reason I went into my field in the 1970s when, we were just starting to be able to study the mind after behaviorism, held us down for 50 years. B.F. Skinner and the rat and pigeon psychology dominated our field, and we weren't even allowed to study consciousness or memory or thought, in psychology until, say, 1970. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but, I started then. That's when I was in high school and college and graduate school in the 1970s. So this was just starting. And it was like, wow, we can finally, go after these basic questions. And we knew nothing. I mean, you go back to our conversations as grad students in our little, dens and going out for a beer and things like that. And the kinds of questions we were asking were the most rudimentary, unsophisticated, dumb questions because we did not know anything. And so it's been a wonderful time to be in this field and be a scientist when, for the first time, we were allowed to study the mind in a scientific manner. And we found out so much since then, but it's not like other sciences that have been around, go back to Newton and Copernicus and so forth, going back hundreds and hundreds of years. We've only done this since about 1975, 1980. And we've learned a whole lot that was not learned before. That's why I start out, talking about Freud, because everyone thinks of the mind. A lot of people think of Freud, and they think of unconscious being this destructive, locked chamber. Even popular movies, have this idea of the unconscious as this dark, locked room that you can't get out of, or things are lurking in there. And what's nice to know is that no, it's not like that. It's like our unconscious operations are like our conscious ones, that they're trying to help us get what we want. They're in our favor. That's what evolution did. It gave us things that were trying to be adaptive and help us survive and help us do what we want to do. And it's much more benevolent. There are maybe some problems, but it's not some evil cauldron of destruction and self-destructive impulses at all.
I know you're into chess, and so am I. So let's use chess as an example.
Okay.
How can we use some of your research to get better at stuff? I play a lot of chess. I'm not sure I'm getting much better. And whenever I try to play a bit quicker and trust my unconscious mind, trust my instincts, it doesn't really seem to work.
Yeah. Magnus Carlsen, then, who's the world chess champion.
Oh, yeah. There's a brilliant film about him, which I loved watching.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
It's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, he just won against a person from St. Louis, which is close to where I grew up. The thing that he says is the way to get, this is going to be very obvious, but the way to get better in chess is to play a lot of chess.
Yeah.
And this is sort of the rule about expertise, the rule, the 10,000 hour rule, or the 21-day rule for habits. But it's that when you play enough, and if you played long and you know this, you see the board differently. The difference between chess experts and non-experts is not really the moves they come up with as much as the quickness with which they see the board and see the patterns and see what's going on and what will happen. It happens with any kind of perceptual skill that we develop, and how we all started when we were driving a car and it was all overwhelming, all the different things to look at, and it was scary because we have a big machine going fast. We're in control of it, and we're not that confident about knowing what to do and react in time. But with time and experience, now it's second nature. And the second nature part is our perceptual apparatus. We know exactly what the cues are. We know where to look, what to do, and without having to think much, we can react very quickly without stopping to have to figure out what to do. And same thing with chess. I'm not very good at speed chess at all. I like the correspondence type of every 3 days kind of move, like a turtle, like a tortoise, because I like to sort of, learn and check and things. But I've gotten better the more I played. I'm now like an 1850, 1900 ranking, like I used to be a 1550, 1600, but by playing all these online chess.com and live chess and things like that, and I played so many games, like thousands and thousands, right? With people around the world, which is fantastic. Never could do that before. I've gotten better. And I've trained and all that, but I think I'm seeing tactics. I'm seeing patterns that I didn't see before.
I'm a bit disappointed by that answer, John.
You got to put in the effort, right? You got to put in the time. It's not some magic potion that you can get better quickly or something.
Yeah, I was hoping there would be something else. I was hoping there would be a magic potion.
But you love it, don't you? I mean, I don't, I wouldn't play just to get better. And it's like people who love something, they do it anyway, right? So the
Yes.
more you do something you love, you get better at it. I just, I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it. I mean, if I didn't really, and also the old saying in psychology is the only time you learn is when you fail. Because if you do the same thing and you succeed, then you're not really learning anything new. So if you take your losses and you take your failures as, this is great, this is an opportunity for me to learn something and get better, which is the way it's nice that school kids should focus on not doing well on tests and things. Like, this is an opportunity, this is the chance I can do better and learn something here. And instead of avoiding losing, if you avoid losing and you play people who are far, not as good as you and all that, then okay, you get the nice pat on the back. I beat the newbie chess player, but it's not going to grow. You're not going to grow and get better at all.
Well, that's what Josh Waitzkin says, who is the man or the boy that the film Searching for Bobby Fischer was made about. I don't know. I mean, he's just brilliant. I love his work.
Yeah.
Just interrupting this podcast for one moment to tell you that it is brought to you by Kitoko MCT oil. Extra pure 99.8% C8 MCT oil. Very pure, very good quality. This podcast is all about energy and vitality, and that's why we are brought to you by pretty much the best quality MCT oil on the market. If you find Kitoko MCT oil on Amazon and you enter the code Zestology, you will get 10% off. And it'd be a pleasure to give you 10% off for a little bit more energy. You put it into your bulletproof coffee. It's perfect for bulletproof coffee because it's completely tasteless. Or you can drizzle it on salads or food, or you can cook with it, or all the rest of it as well. So Kitoko MCT oil. There are other Kitoko products as well, including collagen and keto green powder. Only 2 grams of carbs, so that's good as well, isn't it? Search for Kitoko. You'll get 10% off if you enter the code Zestology for the MCT oil. And now back to the podcast. I work for a TV station over here. It's a sports channel, and we did a feature on someone who graduated from university, obviously had quite a bit of extra money sloshing about, and decided that he wanted to take Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule and try to apply it to becoming a professional golfer. And he set up a site at the same time chronicling his progress, and he called it the danplan.com. So after the first kind of 2,000 hours, he was doing really well. He was playing off scratch. He was hitting long balls. And he set himself the goal that he wanted to play on the PGA Tour. And then after about 4,000 hours, I think it all started to go a bit wrong. He I think he developed quite a few injuries. And after about 6,000 hours, he filmed this emotional video where he said he was going to give it a rest for a while and go and do something else. It'd taken about 10 years of his life. But I think often with these things, golf and probably chess as well, if you do it from childhood, you got even more of an advantage because the unconscious mind gets into such a groove, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the period of plasticity. That's where the channels are being formed. I think there's even evidence on what happens in your mind that the more you're interested in something, the more of your brain is devoted to that, as opposed to being devoted to other things. And so it's a very, very important time. If you are like Tiger Woods was on the famous Tonight Show, a late night NBC show with Johnny Carson, I think, when he was 3 years old, he was a prodigy. So he was already a prodigy golfer when he was 3 years old because his father had him out there when he could, probably before he could stand up, playing golf and putting and things like that. So his whole mind was just, all the resources were about this physical activity and coordinating the muscles and all the skills that went in it. So if you have your whole brain devoted to something from early childhood, then it's going to be a tremendous advantage. And that could be chess, that could be singing, or it could be dance. It could be anything. But that's the thing with kids. It's hard though. I have a daughter. The thing is, what they're really interested in when they're 3 or 4, they drop it, when they're 6 or 7. And it's like, oh no, you spent all these years, gymnast, or all these years dancing, or all these years, whatever it was, and now you're not interested anymore. But that's all of us, right? If we stuck with it, maybe we do it. But if you don't like it anymore, if it's no fun anymore, it's too bad. But
Well, what do
We
you
don't
think
stick
about
with
this?
things.
I have a 4-month-old baby, and so I've been reading
Oh, yeah.
a lot of books on parenting, actually. And I read
Yeah.
something recently that suggested that it's not the old theory of giving Andre Agassi a tennis racket at the age of 2 and forcing him to hit, 1,000 balls a day. That
Right.
apparently doesn't hold so true anymore. And they think that if your child gets exposed to a variety of sports and disciplines and things that they love and are able to make their own minds up as they grow older,
Yeah.
it actually can make them more flexible in
Yeah,
learning whatever they decide to do in future. So I wonder
I've
if that
heard
has
that.
some weight as
I
well.
definitely see. I'm not an expert. I've read the same kinds of things, and they're saying that these kids who play multiple sports,
Yeah.
who are really the great athletes, and hockey, baseball, football, when they draft and they sign bonuses to young aspiring, they seem to be realizing, maybe through their algorithms, that the ones that play multiple sports are the ones that work out in the long run to be the great athletes who play baseball as well as football, multiple sports, because there's an overall kind of athleticism and coordination. It may not be a physical type either. It's definitely true that they all give you something different, in the different sports instead of specializing in one. I also think, like you're saying too, it prevents burnout. Like what happens if the tiger mom or the tiger dad makes you play the piano or something, over 6 hours a day since you're 6 years old, and man, you're missing out on other things, and you might resent it, and you just get tired of it, and maybe you define yourself as just that and not anything else, and it can be a drag. So I'm more of a laissez-faire parent. You've got a lot of parents listening who have their own theories about it from their own experience, but I'm more of a laissez-faire, like what you like and what you enjoy, go for it, because that'll be the most naturally engrossing, attention. You won't have to try to do that. You'll focus on it because you love it, and put the hours in, out of sheer enjoyment instead of out of drudgery.
Yeah. And in terms of obviously we've spoken about environment and we've spoken about kind of tapping into your unconscious mind as much as possible. How do you set up your day and your environment to get the best out of yourself? I'm interested in, obviously we know about the cups of coffee, but do you meditate? Do you go to bed early? Do you read a lot? Do you switch the TV on? Do you switch your phone off at night? How's your own environment look?
Well, your mileage may vary, right? But what I figured out, in fact, when I was writing the book, I had to sort of, I had my day job. I was still a professor at Yale. I was running a lab. I was teaching in committees and meeting with students. And how do I find the time? So what I did was, I tend not to sleep very well, maybe because I drink too much coffee, but I tend not to sleep so well. So I'm awake at 5 or 6, and I could try to sleep more. But I decided to go with it and get up early, give myself lots of strong coffee, and then use that time in the morning between 6 and 10 a.m. Just to totally focus on the book. After which I knew I could take a break. And one thing about getting up early, if you have the luxury, an academic job or a writer's kind of, not everyone has this kind of luxury, to know that I could take a nap or I could crash, at noon, say, or after I put in a good 5 or 6 hours. I'll be able to have like a little nap for an hour or so. And knowing that is like the carrot, dangling in front of me, that I don't have to put in a 9 to 5 day. I can get up at 6. I can go for it until I just finally, can't go any farther, and then have my rest. And then I can enjoy the rest of the day. I can, go out and do something with my wife, or, cook, or, watch, catch up on sports, play chess, whatever it is. I know that I have the rest of the day after that. So I use that as kind of a carrot and stick thing. What I found was, and this is, something that the writer Norman Mailer once recommended about writing, to give your mind, your unconscious mind, assignments for what you want to do tomorrow. So it really worked for me. What I did was I'd really work hard on a chapter. And by the time I finished a chapter, in a week or 10 days, actually, when I was really writing, I would do a chapter every 10 days. And I would get to the end. Well, instead of patting myself on the back and say, "Yay, another chapter," I would immediately get the next chapter. All the piles of notes or things that I had prepared, all the 200 pages of stuff I wanted to talk about in the next chapter. I would go through it. I would load my mind up with that next thing. And then I'd go and have a good day, relax, take a nap, play chess, whatever. And what I found was when I got back to the next morning, I had all these great ideas about how to structure it, how to organize it, what was important. And I was really enthusiastic and I was excited about getting into this next chapter and dove right in and had ideas about, oh, this leads to this, leads to this, and things like that. So my back office was working on it. I gave it this assignment and it knows it's an important goal for me. It's working on it in the background while my conscious mind is doing other things. It's the same kind of effect as when you can't remember something and you really want to, and it's tip of your tongue and you just can't remember, and then you forget about it, and then all of a sudden it pops into your head. Well, that's not magic. What happened was the goal was operating even when your conscious mind went off and did something else. And so that worked. I used that into my advantage, and it was fantastic. I think the latter half of my book was better than the first half because I got into that kind of groove and that kind of routine and let these connections sort of make themselves and then be ready for me. Just like Mailer said that, he said, you got to do that. But you got to show up. You can't just say, I'm taking the day off. You give it's like a relationship. You give your unconscious goals in mind an assignment and you work with it. And it does that, but you better show up in the morning and not just, sleep in or goof off or not do it, because then, they won't trust you. It's like it'll do the work and you're not there and it won't do it next time because you didn't show up. So it's like a relationship with your own mind in a way. But I put that to practice, and that's my day. I get up, I work really hard knowing I can, as soon as I am crashing after 5 or 6 hours of the coffee or whatever, I can enjoy the rest of the day. And I put in my time, work efficiently, and then I have that carrot, the rest of the day to look forward to.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And then something I've asked everyone on this podcast is, what is one book that you would recommend and one tip for living with more energy, vitality and motivation? What would your book and your tip be?
Oh, as far as a self-help type book?
It can be anything. I mean, it can be fiction, can be non-fiction, whatever you like.
What I really, really love, and I'm so glad I did, I wish I could do it again, is I read the complete Sherlock Holmes. I read everything. It's a giant book, tiny print, 1,200 pages, has every short story, and every long novel and everything else. And I loved it. For one thing, I'm a London-ophile. We've been there 3 times in the last couple of years, and
great.
I love wandering around the different streets that are in the book. I just loved it because I love the writing. I love the idea of mystery, a kind of puzzle to be figured out. I love the process that's gone through, and I found so many parallels to what real thought and real puzzle solving is like when you do it as a scientist. Holmes, he would come to an impasse and he would go play the violin, take cocaine, whatever he did, he would take a break, and then he'd come back and his said, oh, Watson, my mind is refreshed. Now he could solve things. And I always took that as, that's true, but I don't think it's your mind is refreshed as much as you've loaded all this stuff up. Your conscious mind can't figure it out. But sometimes unconsciously, the connections can be made and complexities can be solved if you just take your mind off what you're doing and take a break and come back to it later. And that over and over in those stories, that's what Holmes did and came back to something. So there was a very intuitive correctness in which those stories that Doyle wrote these stories. I mean, he was very accurate. He was very intuitive in terms of how he understood this process. And it's so human. And it's just, I loved them. And I maybe I'll start from the beginning all over again. I was sad when it was over, but in a span of 2 or 3 months, I read every single word that Doyle ever wrote on Holmes and Watson. And I don't know about recommending that, but if you've never done it and if you've never read those personally, I just think that's great. The other,
that's a wicked recommendation. And if you if you come to London again to retrace his footsteps, then let me know. We'll record a podcast in person.
We went to Baker Street. We went to that little museum that got on the first floor there, and that was cool. Right by Madame Tussauds, right, and right around the corner on Baker Street. But I've already said we just love London and we love the history, and that just brings it all to life. But there was a second part of your question. Now that I've gone on so long about Holmes, I forgot the other part of your question.
The second part was, well, the pure passion around Sherlock Holmes was excellent, and I enjoyed that very much, John. The second part was, what is one tip for living with energy, vitality, and motivation?
This is going to be I don't want to be a downer on this one, because that sounds, an uplifting kind of thing. I think you got to figure it out. I do think you got to. For me, I had one question, and it was very existential, and it was, I grew up around the time when magazines were saying things like, is God dead? And there was a real crisis, and this was 1970. There was all the political crises in the streets in Paris and the Vietnam War and everything else, and it was very existential. It was, what are we really about, and let's grow up and everything. And I had this basic existential question about the meaning of life, and that's why I did what I did for so long. I really wanted to understand it. And that was my passion. That was my burning thing that kept me going. And in fact, when I finally had my dream with the alligator that I talk about in the book, that sort of revealed everything, it was entirely demotivating, because that's what I wanted. I had my answer, and everything made sense to me. And I'd been struggling it for 35, 40 years. And it was demotivating. I didn't really care anymore. I found my answer. I didn't need to tell the world about it. It was a personal quest. It was something that, it wasn't about, telling other people or writing about it. It was just what I wanted to know myself. So I had to pick myself up. And wonderfully for me, that's when my daughter was born. And that gave me a new purpose. It gave me, a lot of insight into, human feelings. That as a new parent, I'm sure it's something about your first child. For me, especially, that I was 51 when she was born, so I was very late in life, and I always wanted children, and it was just totally changed my life, and it taught me a lot. So I don't know what the word is. The thing is, everyone knows where the real happiness is, and everyone knows, if they don't know, they should find out first what it is that makes you happy, what it is that really is what it's about for you. And I think we all need to answer that. It used to be everyone was interested in that question. The 60s were like that, what is the big picture? What's the meaning of life kind of thing? But I think you got to come up with your answer. And once you have that answer, I think things fall into place. My priorities completely fell into place, about work versus home, about, the meaning of relationships and love and trust and all that. It just totally, it took her birth to teach me that. But once I got that answer back then, and I sort of had the answer to my scientific quest, everything fell into place, and I've been a different person. I've been much happier. I've been much more understanding of what I need to do with the limited time we have on the planet, and it's I don't want to be morose. It's actually, it's hard to explain, but I just think we all need to find that answer for ourselves. And that will then open up everything as far as, what you want to do and energy. It's like, it gives every day, when you wake up, it gives that kind of, purpose, as in the purpose-driven life and that kind of cliche, but you got to find out what that purpose is before you just can't give yourself a purpose and say, okay, now I have a purpose-driven life. It's got to be the purpose what your life is about, and this sounds so cliche. Listening to myself say this stuff, it's like,
purpose sounds, that sounds, for a while I toyed with the kind of strapline of this podcast being energy, vitality, and purpose. And in the end, I settled on motivation. But, it's kind of similar thing. And once you work that out, I suppose everything becomes easier. So,
yeah. Well, if you figure it out, let me know. That's all. But we all got to try. Don't listen to what other people say. Don't listen to what I say. Don't listen, to what other people's version of this is. You got to do it for yourself.
So, John, look, it's been really good to talk to you. Highly recommend your book in terms of kind of understanding the mysteries and complexities of the human brain and human behavior. Where can people find it and find out more about you as well?
Sure, it's on Amazon. It's Before You Know It. It's on Amazon. It's a paperback now. It's very available. And I'm at Yale. I direct what's called the Acme Lab, and so anyone who searches for my name and Acme Lab will find our webpage, acmelab.yale.edu, where we put up our publications and what we're doing in our research and so forth. But I put everything I could possibly put from what I've learned into that book, and I wanted it to get out there so people could see what we've learned and make it more accessible and available, and try to make it fun to read. Try to put dumb jokes in there, things like that.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's the important thing. Yeah. That's what's come across today as well. Making science, research, and kind of deep topics understandable and relatable. That's when it kind of works really well. So. Yeah. So well done on that, and thanks for the interview. It's great to talk as well.
Yes, Tony. Thank you, and good luck with everything.
I've got a nasty feeling if we were to meet in person, you would hammer me at chess.
Well, I don't think so.
Well, I told you it was planes, trains, and automobiles in this part of West London. And there's a tube just crossing the Thames in the distance. Nice sunlit evening down by the River Thames. Thank you very much to John for coming on. Do check out his book, absolutely fantastic. And he really knows his stuff, doesn't he? He comes at it from a very academic perspective, and that is something that I particularly like. That's pretty much it for Zestology. Have a great time. Remember to buy Ketoko MCT oil and the other Ketoko products on Amazon as well. Only Amazon in Europe at the moment. Sorry if you're in America or the rest of the world, because I know about half of this audience's location is the States, and can't help you yet because it's not on Amazon.com, but it is on Amazon.co.uk and in Italy and France and Germany and all the rest of it. So if you search for keto and then a KO on the end, Ketoko MCT oil, you will find it. And I am sure that will give you the little boost of extra energy that you need. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.